My name is Tanya Dodd, former Hamilton County school teacher and current chapter chair of Moms for Liberty. Please consider what I say when voting on the 76 seed coach positions. What I have to say comes from my heart. Every word is for all parents and children. What is being proposed is a direct assault on parents and their God-given right to be the center of their child's social and emotional development. Let's discuss the facts. SEL is Marxist activism posing as an educational tool. That's a broad claim, so let me explain. We are living in a paradigm shift of identity and culture-based Marxism. The domain of analysis has shifted from economics to culture and from class to identity. This Leviathan is called neo-Marxism, and its tool is critical pedagogy. Paulo Freire was the father of critical pedagogy, the liberation theology, which is critical theory applied to the theories of education. When you apply oppressor and oppressed, master and slave to culture and identity, you breed a ramification of new forms. Neo-Marxism is anything with the word critical in front of it, such as critical race theory, critical gender studies, and yes, critical pedagogy. Freire was also the proto-godfather of everything Castle, including Seed. The most cited book on SEL, called The Handbook of Social Emotional Learning, states the purpose of Castle is to use SEL techniques to raise critical consciousness. This is central to Freire's works. In Chapter 9 of Politics of Education, Freire states the purpose of education is to humanize man and the world, exactly as indicated by Karl Marx. Why is this important? One of Castle's go-to scholars, Linda Darling Hammond, says this is the purpose of SEL. She wrote the foreword to the Handbook of SEL, and I quote, "SEL is deeply Freirean, and what must happen is the humanization of education." Castle approved programs like SEED are Marxist because that's what Castle says it is. It's Freirean. Freire Marxified the academy by making learning a process of liberation and consciousness raising, not education and literacy. Freire explains in Chapter 10 what educators must endure to be true educators. He calls for their brainwashing. The United Nations and all scholastic literature that came out of the Maoist regime, where the term was invented, defines brainwashing as, and I quote, "the process of fixed personality death and rebirth through the medium of indoctrination." Freire writes, "Proper education demands an Easter. That is, it demands that we die to be born again. Conversion to the people requires a profound rebirth. Those who undergo it must take on a new form of existence. They can no longer remain as they were." Not one part of SEL handbook makes academics primary. Because of that, SEL has not been and will continue to not be helpful in raising achievement scores. There's no evidence to support this ideology other than the debunked Durlac meta-analysis. What is called evidence-based means Castle approved. Parents don't want unlicensed social workers and unlicensed psychologists gathering psychometric data on their children. You are giving away children's private emotional universe to big corporations. If nobody believes this, there is a highly influential and groundbreaking piece called Psychodata. SEED stands for Social Emotional Academic Development. It holds social emotional unlicensed character development and consciousness raising of neo-Marxist marginalized statuses above all else. Marx said the child should be raised by the state, not in the lap of his mother. It is not the state's place to character develop children. That is an intimate practice of the home or licensed professionals. Because Castle has explicitly called SEL a Freirean project and supports the humanization of education, it is by definition a neo-Marxist project. It isn't up for debate. SEL's purpose is to raise awareness of whatever neo-Marxist marginalized social status someone falls under so they can become activists in the ideology of social justice. Please do your research on neo-Marxism and do not approve these seed coach positions. Thank you for your time.
Dodd. Angela Floro, hope I'm saying that right. Favaloro, thank you.
Good afternoon, not chairwoman, but the rest of the board. I'm Angela Favaloro. I'm a parent in District 5. I have 2 students in Hamilton County Schools, 1 in high school and 1 in 3rd grade. Y'all have known me speaking on policy with Moms for Social Justice, but I am coming tonight as a mom, one who's navigated through 5 different Hamilton County schools, some traditional, some charter, through the hurdles of IEP plans, kids being bullied, my kids being the bully, moments of crisis, just being a parent on the outside of this school system before, during, and after the pandemic. And my story isn't all that unique. I'm speaking in favor tonight of the SEED positions under 8B1 and referencing some of the ongoing budget planning meetings that have referenced their demand in staffing budgets. Kids are complex, aren't they? I know none of the parenting books prepared me for this. They didn't really prepare any of us for this. Because the notion that something simple is the answer to something complex is pretty short-sighted. First, I'd like to say to anyone who says that something is wrong with someone or that something has to be wrong with someone for them to seek counseling is not only an erroneous statement, but a benighted one. Athletes get coaches to hone skills every day. We praise them for their tangible success, but want to shame students or people in society for honing their mental health skills, or to dissuade others from investing in the people capital needed in these programs because there isn't a state championship title of mental health. Most of the reasons people admire athletics and their impacts on us are because of the social emotional skills they learn from team and goal-oriented lessons that are baked into team sports and the coaches that they go to help navigate those hardships. We all use social and emotional tools each day to navigate work, stress, relationships, and what to do when things are beyond our control. And man, don't you think these kids experience a lot of things that are beyond their control? Don't you think that's pretty hard to handle? There have been days where some of your employees have made the difference in whether my child went into a crisis situation or not. Whether they could bounce back from triggers that outside of school they have support for, but not during the school day. If anyone has lived with or loved someone with a crippling anxiety, you understand how individualized and complex the needs are, and we're just one example. If families have the means to get these services outside of school, currently in our community, the average wait time is 3 months or more to get private care, and that's a long time. Our kids have 6,000 waking hours per year, and we trust your schools with almost 1,300 of them. For me as a parent, that's a lot of trust. I've heard some people say they don't co-parent with the government. And they're right. We're not co-parents. We're not equals. But you know that old saying, it takes a village? No truer words have been spoken about our relationship with schools. And your role in the village is to use what we've invested as a community to provide vital resources for all kids that are in your care. If we only focused on the basics of reading, writing, arithmetic, our kids would be left without any emotional support for over 1/6 of their lives each year in school. No support for navigating a playground scuffle or a bully that's left them distracted the rest of the day, causing them to have unexcused work. No support for test anxiety around the multitude of tests they prep for every single day. No support for kids who aren't reading well and don't know all the details, but they know they might be held back this year based on the results of one or more of those tests they hate so much. No support for when they're not getting the math and they're just not getting it. And they feel like they can't get anything right, and they don't even know why they even try. No support to address the problems of students being victims of violence, perpetrators of violence, or exposure to violence. When we talk about behavior and how rough it is in our schools, our teachers, our administrators, our students, and parents like me have been asking for supports like these in and out of these budget meetings. These positions are more than worth their line on this budget. Kids aren't innately bad. Hurt people, and more discipline doesn't relieve hurt. Accountability and preventative care aren't mutually exclusive. Meeting students' well-being and mental health needs is the most affordable, preventative way to address behaviors before they become more extreme. You're supposed to have 1 counselor per 250 students, and we're only budgeting for even 1 to 350 so far. You have to make important changes to grow with our students instead of trying to prune back the resources for them. You can pay now with the funding that the state says that you should spend on this, or you can pay later with our kids' well-being or possibly their lives. And for many of us, that is that dire. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Gooden.
Good afternoon. I'm here today to update you on the board progress of collaborative conferencing. We have enjoyed working with the district to elevate the concerns of our staff and to work with the district to create a memorandum of understanding that promotes our mutual intent to create great working and learning conditions. Here are some of the things that we have worked on. We have agreed on a framework for formalizing the role of educator voice in the workplace. Educators will have the ability to elect their own representatives to school leadership committees, breaking through the perceived wall between staff and administration. We have clarified the language around planning time to ensure educators are getting the time they need to focus on planning for instruction. We have also agreed on a framework for duty and meetings. We have agreed on a common goal for increased compensation for professional employees. We have to wait for budget talks to finalize this, but I am hopeful. We're happy to share that both sides are eager to give professionals the meaningful increase. And I want to tell you today that I look forward to continuing this work with the district. Stepping into this position for the first time has been a valuable experience for me. And I have enjoyed working, and I hope to continue this next year. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Now we have a couple that's been added here. So Rebecca Day.
Hey, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Some of you know me, some of you don't. If you don't know me, you can ask your colleagues about me. First, 4:30 speaking time is inconvenient, which is why I'm here, because working parents, a lot of them can't come. And I drive from Sale Creek, so it was a rush to get here to get signed up. I know you're voting on the SEED supports, and I've done lots of research on it. So since we just learned that SEED equals SEL, and the mechanism in Hamilton County for collecting SEL data is the survey, I want to touch on that for just a minute and then circle back around to the SEED position. So just to give you a quick overview of what's happened over the last couple of weeks. So there were questions about the notifications for the spring surveys, and then some emails did come out to the parents letting them know that the spring survey was going to be given, but that the emails directed the parents to the website to go to PowerSchool, and PowerSchool is grayed out. So if you opted out in the fall, it's grayed out. You can't do anything in the spring, but then get back into the school. You know, the parents got that email. They went out to PowerSchool. It wasn't accessible, so some of them emailed the principals or their teachers or called. And then some surveys were still given to kids that were opted out. So now, having said that, my student is in high school. She has a mouth, and she can tell an adult, someone in authority, my Meemaw does not want me to take this survey. And she told me that they sent her out of the room when the survey is given. A second grader, on the other hand, looking at their teacher, you know, in their mind, especially if they're timid, they're given this survey, they may not be brave enough to speak up and say, Mom doesn't want me to take this survey. And then they take the survey, and then the parent finds out, or not, because the kid might not come home and tell them. So one experience that I was informed about was the parent found out about it, called the school, said, what are you doing with my kid's data? They said, whoops, sorry, we're going to delete it. Okay, TCA 492211 is the law in Tennessee that says you have to inform the parent. So if it's not followed, what happens? You know, what happens to the person or the admin or the process or the system? What happens when that law is not followed? Who is held accountable for not following the law in the school system? So I've done research on all of you. I'm sure you all know that. 3 business owners, or maybe 4, 2 social workers, 3 teachers or former teachers, 2 people that have experience in nonprofit, 1 stay-at-home parent. I would ask you personally, What private business owner that breaks the law is not held accountable in some way? They're fined, they may be sued, they may lose something. Like, when is the Hamilton County school system going to be held accountable for not following this law? And not just this law. So my final question is, if the current administration isn't capable of ensuring compliance over 100 social workers, now I researched that on my own. I have no idea how many social workers or counselors or seed coaches. I know there's a handful of seed coaches already. I don't know how many are total in the system because it's impossible to find anything on the website. When you go and you look in that directory, all the people aren't out there. You have to go to individual schools and look up the counselors. So there's a little over 100. If they can't control compliance over that, what makes you think they're going to be able to effectively control compliance over 100 or more counselors, seed coaches, social workers? God only knows. I don't know how many more positions are up for hire. So why not use some common sense? There's a lot of red flags, there's unanswered questions, and frankly, there's legal issues that are unknown. Why not take a page from the legislature and roll this to summer session? Which I understand that's where a bill goes to die, but maybe it won't die. Maybe you can talk about this more, because this is a lot of money to invest in a lot of positions that they're not being handled correctly at the moment. Like, I would like to see Hamilton County School System run a report of all of the students that were opted out. Bump that up against all of the students that took surveys. If any of those students that were opted out in the fall took a survey, they need to be proactively contacting the parent. They need to be asking the parent what they want to do with that data. They need to be showing the parent what questions were asked to the child. And they need to be offering supports to that child who disobeyed their parent and took that survey. Like, let's think about the kids that have to answer to some parents might get mad. You took a survey? Like, we all need to use common sense here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Day. Jason Benton.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to let me speak. I have 3 kids in the Hamilton County school system. I have a pre-K at Allen. I have a kindergartner at McConnell, and I have a special needs student at Loftus. Right now, y'all are talking about budget talks and what to do with the funding. The special needs, the coaches for emotional needs and stuff, it's great, but I would like to see some of the funding go towards the CDC program in our school system. A lot of parents of regular kids or normal kids don't understand or don't know that the challenges that special needs parents and special needs students go through. There's several examples. I'll just give one. Some of the special needs classrooms, for example, have washer and dryers in the classrooms because most of the kids are incontinent, so their clothes have to be washed, and the parents, like myself, we donate the pods and the washing detergent and stuff for these classrooms. Every classroom is different. My son in particular, Matthew, has cerebral palsy and is autistic. He was at Spring Creek Elementary last year. Their classroom is set up great. They have the padding for the floor, the padding for the wall. Everything looks really good. And when he went to Loftus this year, he started this year, the classroom is set up for normal kids. It's just a basic classroom. They do have a small kitchen in there. They do have a washer and dryer, but that's pretty much it. Some of the funding should go towards making these classrooms for these kids with special needs suitable and comfortable to where they can get things done that they need to do for their classroom. Another example I had to give I just thought of was in Matthew's classroom, there's 2 toilets, one a normal size and one that like the K students use, the kindergartners, just real small, low to the ground. And there's a particular kid in this classroom who's scared of the bigger toilet, so but they don't have a smaller one in that classroom. So there's not a toilet for him to use. So they have to take him down the hall. So those are two examples where the funding, I think, should go. Whatever y'all decide to do, I encourage y'all guys to get out into y'all schools, talk to the teachers and the faculty, and see what the needs are. And you know, this funding is great, but it's only great if you do get great things with it. Just take your time and consider everything. Everybody spoke here today. Their views are important, and what they said is important. Just consider all of it, and I hope y'all make the right decision in all this. And again, I just like to see some of the funding go towards this. It would help out for a group of students that sometimes is often looked or not thought about. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Benton. Susan McCain.
Evening. My name is Susan McCain. I'm a math teacher at Hickson High School right now. I've been teaching in Hamilton County the last 2 years. I've been a teacher total for 6 years. I have praxis scores, EOC scores, pass failure rates, observations, growth scores. By all accounts, I'm a pretty good teacher. And this year, I'm not enough for my students. The regular trials and tribulations of high school combined with coming back to normalcy after a pandemic means I need a lot more support to help my students navigate their lives. Because at the end of the day, if they're trying to figure out what lunch they're going to pack for their little brother and sister, or who's going to get transportation, or even, God forbid, what's going to happen to their parents who might be incarcerated, they're not focusing on my math lesson. And I can't say I blame them all that much. I really wanted to let y'all know just how strongly I support funding the SEED coaches. Because at the end of the day, I am a math teacher. I am a good one. But I am not prepared to help my students in the ways that they need. I desperately need another trained adult to help me help my kids. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. McCain. So that moves us down to presentations, I believe. Dr. Stewart.
Vice Chairman Smith, members of the board, Superintendent Robertson, I appreciate the opportunity to share with you the findings of our K-12 math adoption selection process. I'll pause and say also in the audience, I'd like to recognize Dr. Yvette Stewart and Dr. Jamie Paris, who are on the front row. They're our directors of elementary education as well as high school. And Dr. Rice is not with us today, but he's middle school. And I'll say in front of you all, they do phenomenal work, and they've done a great job leading this process. So thanks to them. As you're well aware, just a second. Got a little excited there. Here we go. All right. So just a little bit of our past adoption. The last adoption we had for math was in the 2015-2016 school year, with the implementation occurring in 2016-2017. Since that time, the Tennessee State Standards for Math have been revised, and that's the reason why we are in an adoption year. We need to select a math curriculum that will match and be aligned to the new implementation, which will take into effect in the fall of next year. When we think about why it's important to have high-quality instructional materials, there's so much research out there around the fact that we have to have strong, high-quality instructional materials as the foundation for what happens in a classroom. In Hamilton County Schools, we see that as a way to do many things. Number one, it ensures cohesion among and provides a cohesive trajectory for a student. So when we think about math, we think about all the way from number sense in kindergarten all the way up to how do we prepare them in high school to move in and be successful in their post-secondary endeavors. And so cohesion is built across grade levels. Equitable access to curriculum. I want to make sure that every single student is given the opportunity to have high quality instructional materials that are aligned to standards, regardless of where their school is, regardless of where their zip code is, that they have standards that, they have curriculum that are aligned and follow the blueprint of implementation. Also, it provides focus for teachers. We obviously just heard from a pretty incredible teacher here today. Providing curriculum for teachers reduces the amount of times that teachers have to go out and find things on their own, allows them to be able to focus on the art of instruction. Also, high quality instructional materials provide a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And what that means is that makes sure that throughout the course of the school year, all of the standards are followed, that teachers have the opportunity to present the standards to students, and then in the course of their kindergarten through 12th grade year, they cover all the standards that align to post-secondary success. And lastly, reducing variability. We think it's extremely important that every single student has access to the same instructional materials. And when you think about the context of Hamilton County schools, you think about transient students especially. We want to make sure that a student has the opportunity, if they were to have to leave a school in the middle of the school year, that when they move into a different school, they're not being reintroduced into a new curriculum, new standards, that they're actually, they have that cohesion and reducing variability. Even all the way back into 1996, we were reflecting yesterday as we were preparing to speak to you all. I remember as a middle school principal, the first time I had the opportunity to sit and see the Quasar Project. And what the Quasar Project shows in this research that was done by Smith and Stein is it talks about the importance of having a high quality task, a task that's set up to be able to meet the standards. And even in the cases, if you look at line C, even in the cases where the task that's given to a student is of high quality and perhaps the implementation was low on the teacher's part, you still have moderate success. And so we want to make sure that we provide high quality instructional materials. We've referenced the opportunity myth quite a bit when we've come to you as a board in regards to curriculum, and what the opportunity myth meta-analysis of multiple teachers and students from TNTP found 4 very strong practices that had to happen to provide opportunity for all students. And one of the top ones was consistently providing opportunities for students to work on grade appropriate assignments. So we want to get into the selection process and how that has gone. And so when we think about curriculum implementation in Hamilton County schools, we do think of it as a continuum. And you'll see there's many steps to implementing curriculum with fidelity, but it starts with adoption. And so when we think about our adoption process, I want to point out some things to you about what went into the selection of our recommendation that we're going to bring. Number one, anything that we considered had to align to Tennessee state standards. It had to be clearly articulated and visible. It had to be on grade level and above complex instructional tasks. It had to have a well-designed trajectory. It had to have supports for students as well as supports for parents and their guardians. It had to include high-leverage strategies for teachers and instruction that does not diminish the cognitive demand. And as a reminder, the adoption that, the selection that we have will take into effect in 2023 in the fall of this year and will last with us for 6 years. This breaks down kind of the year-long adoption process. So even when we were at the beginning of this school year, the team was already thinking about how what steps we need to take to be able to be in alignment and bring to you at this moment our selection. So in September and October, the meetings were developed. We began to select the meeting dates and secure a location, and then the textbook committee was developed. That textbook committee had close to 50 committee members that were highly qualified teachers. There was a parent representative in each of the committees, and as well as in the high school case, we had a representative from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga that was there to help us guide along with the more advanced math. We brought that to you in November. You approved our textbook adoption committee. We had a swearing in ceremony, and then the samples were delivered. In January, we had that first committee meeting in which the committee considered 5 different options in each grade band. And when I say grade band, I mean K through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. So they considered those selections, and in that first meeting, using a series of rubrics and criteria, reduced that down to 3 choices. In February, we had our second textbook committee meeting, and we had the representatives of the vendors for each of the 3 selections come. They sat, they asked questions. The committee members asked questions. They were able to see all the resources that would be available to teachers to parents to guardians. And in the in-between time, I should say, from December to January, January to February, and February to March, these committee members were also taking these materials back to their school. They were using them in their classrooms, and they were giving them the opportunity to kind of learn a little bit more. Last week we had our final textbook adoption committee meeting, and that was one last time for all of them to come together. They had the opportunity to look at the surveys that were sent out to all teachers. So all math teachers received a survey. We also did deploy a survey that was on our Hamilton County website for the community if they wanted to take a look. I will say we did not have a lot of participation in that, but we did put that option out there. And after last week's meeting, all three grade bands had a debate. They had criticism. They looked. They went through the criteria and made a recommendation. And let me stop here and just say, I don't know if any of them are in the audience or if they're watching, but I will say a huge thank you to the teachers that gave up their time to participate in that committee. These are teachers that have all of the things, all the tasks that they have being teachers in Hamilton County. They're math teachers on top of that, which is a very heavy lift, I'm sure. But they gave up their time, their free time. They talked with their colleagues. They came and really participated, and they were great participants. And I will say, you have never seen more enthusiastic time than sitting in a group of about 20 elementary school math teachers as they debate mathematics instruction in elementary. They were passionate. They made their pleas, and I was so grateful. And what it said to me, as just a personal aside, as a father of a 9th grader, a 6th grader, and 1st grader in Warren County schools, I felt very blessed and was very glad that we have passionate teachers that are really thinking very critically about the math instruction that our students are going to get. So bringing to you the recommendation, what our hope is that between March and April, this will give you time to ask any questions. Our office is more than welcome to sit down with you individually to go over anything more in depth. But our hope is that in April, when we come back, we'll finalize that adoption selection, which is a part of Tennessee state law. You have to certify that selection. Why we want to do that in April is that allows us to really begin to get materials in. What our ultimate goal is, we would love to be able to send our teachers home with our materials so that when they're in the summertime that they have that, they're becoming familiar with that as well. And then we'll begin our professional development. I've kind of talked about all this, but this just kind of highlights, what we looked at and what that process looked like. This is a sample of the scoring tool, so I wanted you to see this to know this was more than just sitting looking at a piece of textbook and say this is what we really broke it apart and looked at specific criteria, rated that criteria. They submitted that, and those scores were used to make the recommendation. So the last thing I'd say before we get into really looking at the final considerations and what was selected, making the best options, the considerations, we want to make sure that everybody's clear. We considered only curriculum that was Tennessee Department of Education approved and on the vetted list. And so the Tennessee Department of Education, before we take it to committee, they provide for us, here are the list of vendors that they recommend, here's the Ed Report score, here's what they recommend that we look at, so we use that. We also had a consideration, we wanted to make sure that we adopted the same for K through 5, the same for 6 through 8, the same for 9 through 12. We did not want to send to schools a package that was K1 and then 2, 3, and then 4, 5. It's for ease of use and for the ability to be able to deliver professional development. We looked at that. We looked at those Tennessee Department of Education reviews. The team participated in high quality instructional materials implementation sessions, and then we had provided feedback. So the top 3 choices that when we got to our January, February, and March meetings were the following. In elementary school, it was HMH, which is Into Math, McGraw-Hill, which is Reveal Math, and Savvis and Vision Math. In middle school, it was Curriculum Associates Ready Math, HMH, Into Math, and Savvis and Vision Math. And in high school, it was HMH, Into Math, McGraw-Hill, Reveal Math, and Savvis and Vision Math. So after all that process went through, after all the scrutiny, after the debate, after looking at all the scoring tools, the recommendations that we bring to you today are as follows. In K through 5, HMH, which is Houghton Mifflin Harcourt. HMH also in 6th through 8th grade, and then Savas for 9th through 12th grade. The last bit of information I would share is in working with.
Yeah,
Sure.
go back to the the one slide before that. We don't have a handout on
It
this.
I think it just got emailed to us. So.
You just kind
I sent it to you.
Okay,
of.
You want this one?
yes.
Okay, just hold on to this.
Can we move on?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the recommendation based off of these three options is HMH, K through 5, HMH for 6 through 8, and Savas for 9 through 12. As far as estimated cost, looking at the state contract that is provided and speaking with, spoke with all three vendors, the cost $9.2 million over the entire adoption cycle. So I'd remind you that's 6 years of adoption, serving 45,000 students, and if you divide that out, it's approximately $35 per student per year. What that includes is access to the digital and print books. It also includes consumable materials. This is what we do currently as well, and we will continue to do. This means that every student is given a consumable workbook in which it allows for them to actually write in the book, do the computations there instead of the way that was when I was in school. I had this book and then had a piece of paper, and it actually gives me the opportunity to do that. There's also guidance in there to help families as well. It also includes manipulatives for K through 8, so we know how important it is for our little ones and even our middle school students to be able to have those math manipulatives that make sense of the math. And then it also includes training and professional learning. And so that means over the summer, we'll be bringing in representatives from those companies to help us work through just accessing the material, understanding what that's like, and then continuing on into the year, on top of the fact that our team and the teaching and learning team will be developing professional development. For math teachers, this will be the main focus of their August professional development when they come back, and then we'll have embedded professional development all throughout the school year. I spoke of this already, but really the next steps would be approval. We can begin the procurement process, so voting on that in April, beginning with professional development, and then deploying ongoing professional development over the next 6 years. And I'll end before I open it up for any questions. As we look at Opportunity 2030 and the strategic plan, having high quality instructional materials has to occur in order to have the opportunity for every student to learn, for every student to belong, and for every school to be equipped. And so with that, I'll pause and open it up if there are any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Freeman. Ms. Thurman?
This has been a pet peeve of mine since my daughter was in the 5th grade. My daughter is now 34. I was at the meeting before I got on the school board. I had a group called CARE, and I was at a school board meeting when we implemented the math that we implemented back when Jesse Register was here. I'll put my hand over my heart when I say his name, because some people revered him as something wonderful. I revered him as the worst thing that ever happened to Hamilton County, but I digress. The math that he put in this school system did more damage to this school system than we've ever been able to recuperate from. It's exactly the reason this math, I said that night, if they put this math in Hamilton County schools, my daughter will go to private school. which is exactly what we did. You don't get another chance at a good math education. And to my knowledge, it's better, but it's not a whole lot better. I have 2 grandchildren now in school, and some days I want to just go ram my head into the wall. I think, 20 years later, we're still fighting this battle of math. Our math scores are terrible. They got so bad a few years ago that it was just unbelievable that we continued to use the math that we're using. I haven't looked at this. I do have some math teacher friends that I'm going to ask to give me, because I have not looked at all of this math. But I told Justin the other day, I talked to him after the school board meeting about all the ways they show young people to do math. No wonder they think they're dumb. No wonder they hate math. No wonder they don't want to do math. No wonder they get butterflies in their stomach when they have to do math. If I had to draw all those number lines and all those little squiggly lines and draw all those little boxes and all those little circles and all those little lines to do a 3-digit math problem, I would pull my hair out. And like I told Dr. Register back when we adopted that other math that was even crazier than this, I would like for Mary Ellen and people in payroll to use this math to do our budget. If you use that math to do your budget, you would never get it done. If you use this math to do our payroll, you would get paid maybe every 3 or 4 months. Now, we laugh, we think it's funny, but I've seen it firsthand with my children. Like I say, when my daughter went from Hamilton County School, she went K through 5, Hamilton County School in the 6th grade, we put her in private school strictly because of this math. Not this math, but the math we were using at the time. And at that time, I want to be sure the same thing doesn't happen with this math that happened then. We had connected math in elementary school. No, we had everyday math in elementary school. We had connected math at middle school. We didn't find out till the next year, when the second year of implementation, when kids were going from the 5th grade to the 6th grade, nobody taught fractions, the addition of fractions. In the 5th grade, they didn't teach them. In the 6th grade, they were using them. And the 6th grade said, hey, these kids came to us, they don't know how to add and subtract fractions. Oh, well, we forgot. They didn't flow easy. So we were in it was all hands on deck trying to get kids to teach fractions. I hope that we don't make that mistake again. I hope that we can just teach math. If we would just not spend so much time on teaching kids why math works, it really, math is a gift from God. It's not anything that we invented. We had discovered it. It works universally. It's the only universal language there is math. It works in every country and every language. And how you think you can explain why math works to a kindergartner is beyond my comprehension. 2 + 2 is 4 because it is. We don't know why. It doesn't really make any difference why. Because whether you like it or whether you don't, 2 + 2 is 4. It's never going to change. It's been that way for centuries, for thousands of years actually. So, like I was telling Justin, my granddaughter, she's a pretty sharp little kid, and she was so upset about her math. Matter of fact, she's a pretty sharp kid because Zach's daughters were 2 of her best friends, so that shows how smart she is. She has good taste in friends. But she was a pretty sharp kid, and she was getting so frustrated with her math. And so she brought it home to my daughter, and my daughter was trying to help her with it and explain it to her. And she just said, I'm just stupid. I just can't do this. No, you're not stupid, Tinsley. No, you're not stupid. I wanted to say this math is stupid, but you're not stupid. But anyway, she was getting confused because sometimes she would forget to mark out a square when she was doing 3-digit numbers and 3-digit numbers, adding and subtracting. She was forgetting to mark them out. And she would go back and count and recount, and sometimes she would miss a circle or miss a line, and she was getting the wrong answer. So my daughter showed her how to do it the easy way. She told her how to do it. And you know what? She worked 3 pages of math problems and didn't miss a one. And so she went to school. She did it. They told her to pick whichever method she wanted to use. Well, that's the method she wanted to use. She was told that was not allowed in her class. Now, I'm telling you, The thing about math is getting the right answer. I don't care what anybody says, that's the bottom line. When you get your paycheck, you want the right answer on the amount paid to you. You don't care, you're not going to ask Mary Ellen how she came, or how they came about it, or ask anybody in payroll how they came about the numbers. It just is what it is. I think we're frustrating the kids. We're spending so much time on squares and circles and lines and loop-de-loops and number lines when we could just be teaching them to do math. And I think the kids would love it. Most kids like math because it works every time. It's not like English where you can say what you think Shakespeare thought. Nobody knows what Shakespeare thought. We just put all this stuff out there, tell kids what Shakespeare, we really don't know. And which is the reason my English teacher and I used to have some tiffs about that. You don't know what he thought. I'm telling you what I think he thought, you know, but whatever. But math will work every time. And I don't know what this new math looks like, but I'm going to look at it. But if it's this, I just cannot imagine that we're going to continue down this trajectory. I think this is the reason we're getting kids in middle school that don't know how to do algebra, don't know how to do anything, because we have complicated it so, and by that time they've thrown up the white flag and say we don't even care anymore. Let's make kids love math. I took a math major, believe it or not. I mean, I like math because it works every time. But for the love of these kids, they do not get a second chance. We destroyed math education here in this county for so many years. It is time that we do math that parents can help their children with. Because parents, I guarantee you, can balance a checkbook, do their own budget at home without all the squiggly lines and number lines. And that's what these kids are going to need to learn to do. And I do hope that we get some kind of common sense back in this. If not, there's a lot of people just like me. They're going to see this nonsense, and some of them are already put out with it, and are saying we're going to dig ditches with a spoon if we have to get our kids in private school. We're losing students over this nonsense. And being approved by the Tennessee Department of Education means nothing to me because so is that other crap that we've been using for a long time. So that means nothing to me. So I hope and pray that people are using some common sense and know that we can improve on math. Math is just math. And if we want to frustrate these kids and continue to frustrate them, we can do that. Or we can just give them something they can use in the real world.
Thank you, Ms. Thurman. Gary King?
Yeah, I was just curious if you could, and Jamie probably could do it if not, what are the three for elementary, middle, and high? What are the three we're using right now?
Currently in K through 5, we use Ready Math. In 6th through 8th grade, we use Ready Math. And in 9th through 12th grade, it's Springboard.
And then could we get a little, like a summary sheet or whatever, use the point thing with all your teachers, maybe a summary sheet on what led the county to picking these particular ones? I know there has to be strengths in them that made them stand out.
One of the reasons we're presenting tonight is so you're not voting this the same week that we've got a whole month. So
Right.
if you want to see samples of it, we can deliver the samples to you. If you want to meet with the math team, you can meet with the math team. This is a big decision, not just from a financial standpoint, but from, similar comments to what Ms. Herman said. We're with this math for a long time. I think it's one of the bigger decisions that the board makes. And so we're giving you a month to investigate, to meet with us, to ask questions. We can't answer all those questions tonight, but intentionally are presenting it to you so that you've got the next month to ask us whatever you want.
I'm just saying,
Yes, we can get it
I know
to
how
you.
I would do math in the same way she does math.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, the teachers, you had at least 50 teachers look at these different things and they rated them.
Yeah, we can get that to you.
Yeah, and, it doesn't matter to me, because I'm not the ones teaching the kids. I want to see what the teachers said that were the strengths of these programs.
Ms. Robinson?
Thank you. A lot of my questions have been answered. For instance, we will have it in print because a lot of people have come to me and said, I don't like having to go online, and I like the idea of a workbook. Everything will be contained. But I know I learned from multiplication tables, division table, all the way through college algebra, statistics, and calculus. It's very important for everybody to know, what, at the grocery store, three for $5. If you buy one, it's $1.67. Three for $10. So does each class grade build on the other?
So I think it's important to realize and remember how the concepts in each grade level are determined. Okay, so the state has built math standards and the trajectory from kindergarten through 12th grade. Okay, so we'll start there. Those are built off of what is the math that is needed for our students to graduate from high school and then move into adult life or move into post-secondary life in math. From there, the trajectory is built backwards. So it's built to say, to get to point, 12th grade, what experiences, what standards, what concepts need to be taught all the way down to kindergarten, and how does that learning build upon the next year of learning and build upon the next year of learning. And so yes, that's what the state standards do. All the selections that we brought to you today are aligned to those state standards, and then what our district does on top of that is our math content leads that are in elementary, middle, and high school then also provide for teachers guidance about in our curriculum, here's where these things are and how do you access that, how do you use that, how does that build upon when we look at benchmark scores. It's taking a step back and saying, okay, hey, here's a concept that was not understood by a majority of the class for a certain reason. How do we go back and reteach that? I know in this math adoption too, where we will work closely with the Department of Opportunities and Access, which has RTI in it, to talk about how can we push this down into our students that may need additional interventions in math.
So hopefully there's no gaps in
Correct.
the movement from one grade to another.
Correct. Yeah, and I will say, nationally, if you read, math has taken a hit from a national standpoint. The implications of what happened during pandemic did impact math because it does build foundationally upon each other. You have to understand concept A before you can master concept B. And so that was taken into account as well, making sure that whatever we selected is helping to provide interventions.
But is there only one type of math, say for 11th or 12th grader, regardless of what their major might be when they go on to college, whether
So
it's an
when
engineer or...
Yeah, when you get into high school, that's where you have to take your diploma requirements of math. So, we're taking Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. Then you start to have some differentiation of some students that may move on into pre-calculus, calculus, other advanced math courses.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Black?
Hi there. Thank you so much for this presentation. I believe I was approached by several teachers who were nervous. I believe they lived through the situation that Ms. Thurman referenced earlier, and they begged me, like, please make sure that the elementary curriculum and the middle school curriculum match and that they're from the same publisher. It's incredibly important, and I was very encouraged to see that the recommendations do reflect that. I think they were speaking from a little bit of PTSD from trying to get our kids caught up. But thanks for the time you did, and I look forward to seeing some of the raw data that Mr. Keene asked for.
Sure.
But I was encouraged to see that the one kind of concern and maybe a bit of anxiety was wrapped in it that was brought to me was that the elementary school and the middle school curriculum match.
Mr. Connor?
Thank you, Chair. So, something that Rhonda said is dead on. Universal language. Math is the universal language. It's the reason that we sent a spaceship thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of places away without English on it with math, because it can be a constant and learned. And at the end of the day, 2 + 2 is 4. That's what it is. But I have to praise a little bit of what we're doing currently, because I do have a third grader who's learning math at a Hamilton County public school. And if you think about it, when we're teaching foreign language to somebody, if we're teaching Spanish or French to them, we start talking in English, because you have to start where they understand. You have to find out where they understand. And as my daughter progressed in her learning of math, unfortunately, some of the squiggly lines helped her to see the problem at hand. It led to her being able to do the math that then does payrolls and does the jobs that we do in later life. But we had to find that place for learning. So I just want to make sure that we're not forgetting that there's not one way to teach everyone. There's many ways to teach everyone, and we need to make sure that we find the best way to teach all of the children. So that's what I want.
Mr. Perez?
Thank you. So 3 things that just crossed my mind. One, it is a 6-year commitment, and that kind of puts a little fear in me, right? Because of the fact that I'd hate to find out in year 1 that something's not working. Can you just walk me through what happens if in year 1, once we try to implement this across the whole district, something's just not matching with one of our schools, you know, or because again, we teach differently to different people. If some students in some schools are far behind, the curriculum may not be the best match for them. So can you first just kind of help me understand that as we make a 6-year commitment?
Sure, and just as a reminder, the 6-year commitment is what is part of Tennessee adoption policy. So the one good thing that happens, and we've experienced this currently, is because we purchase consumable books, okay, that means we purchase those every single year, and that they come to us because the student owns it. We can give feedback to the vendor in regards to here's what we're seeing, here's what we're not seeing, how can you help to do that all along the continuum of being tied to the standards. So there is some opportunities for us to engage.
Okay, and will there be a continuous review of the curriculum as we're going through that? Like, I assume you do have that in the system where it's not just a review of the teacher in the application of the curriculum, but a review of the curriculum as well as we're implementing it.
So we have 2 content leads in elementary school. We have a content lead in middle school. We have a content lead in high school, and they eat and breathe the curriculum that's adopted. And so their job is to constantly be in review of that curriculum, constantly be in collaboration with instructional coaches that are at the school level, with teachers. Each of those grade bands have a council of highly effective teachers in mathematics that come together and give feedback. We actually use them to do presentations as well when we're doing mass professional development. And so that is a continuous cycle that would occur.
Okay. The second thing, and you alluded to that, we have been hit by regression due to the pandemic. And in the past, what I've heard from you, I believe, was we're still going to hold to the same standard and try to catch up. How are we incorporating the reality of the impact of the pandemic on current math understanding into bringing in a new curriculum?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of data points that we could look at. Number one, our internal benchmark scores that we have is one indicator where we can see, because we break those down into what's called an item analysis, and so we can look at, every benchmark that we offer usually offers 3 questions per standard, and we can really dig in and see, this standard is a plaguing standard for a large part of the district, or this is a plaguing standard for this particular classroom, as well as our screener data that happens. And so in elementary school, middle, and high, we have students that are taking iReady, which is a screener to be able to determine who needs RTI tier 2 and 3. So we use that to be able to understand where those gaps are. And that was in part of the consideration as we looked at the adopted curriculum. Part of that's going to be practice, though, and it's going to be in the classroom as a teacher is looking at their class, and they're starting to see that, hey, there may be a gap for this subsection of students. What that happens is really in the craft of teaching. It's launching the students into an assignment and let them begin to work on a task, and then pulling a group of students together in a small group setting to kind of see where we are.
So I'm not an educator, but I would agree with that, except that if we're pushing people forward, math is a building. Sometimes it's, well, we've got to follow the curriculum, and I've got students behind, and we're just kind of pushing through anyway. So again, that my hope is that the curriculum allows for that flexibility of a reality that some students are significantly behind, and our system will take care of it. You know, math will be the new reading in a few years, right? And we'll be told that students who fall behind will need to be kept back.
Can I say one more thing about that? So
Yeah.
that's the reason why we have pacing guides that we help to deliver to allow for teachers to understand. To be able to get to this point at the end of the year, you have to stay on pace of teaching these concepts throughout the year. Those decisions would happen, like I said, is it a small group or is it a larger conversation to say this student needs additional time on top of that core instruction?
Okay, and last, which was, I heard in the community meeting that I went to regarding the budget, was a parent expressing the concern that was already referenced here, but the fact that for many parents, they are unable to help their students with math. And each of us hits it at a different point when, although I was very good at math and advanced in math in college, somehow I forgot all of that by the time my kids hit 10th or 11th grade, and I just looked at them and said, it'll make better friends. So in that sense, how do we provide opportunity for parents to support where they are completely lost in some of these?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say at the Freeman household too, there's many times where I have to say, give Dad about 10 minutes and then come back so we
Talk to
can
your
work through
mom.
this. Yeah. So I think, you know, listening to the comments that were made last week in the budget meeting, and then hearing comments, we've had some internal conversations too about how can we perhaps help some schools to host some math nights that happen at their school. We do this for literacy, but are there some math nights that we can do where we're bringing people into the specific school, utilizing those teachers to help parents through that? I think that's definitely something that we're hearing that we can concentrate on about how do we help.
So let me,
get
so let me add that as a challenge, really, because I think for a second, third grade parent to have to tell their child, I don't know how to help you right now, is always a challenge in itself. So let's find ways to be creative and make it easy.
I think it's a good press for us to think about, and we could set up a Canvas course for parents that, you know, goes through and even maybe video, and we've been pressing on videoing exemplars of teachers doing lessons and post those for parents to be able to watch and see it. So it's a good press for us to think about.
Thank you.
Rhonda, did you?
Yeah, I have a couple more things to say. What happened to our, we were doing a Singapore math pilot. What happened to that?
Yeah, we've been over, I mean, for the past 5 years, we have been supplementing because of some of the struggles that we have. We supplemented with Singapore math. Even the math that we're using right now is we're being supplemented so that we can address some of these things. Singapore math is obviously not an approved curriculum from the state. It was simply something that was being piloted to improve what was already in the curriculum.
You know, Singapore math's been #1 in the world forever. I can see why we wouldn't approve it. Makes a lot of sense. But anyway, and these math nights for parents, I attended a few of those. My husband was an engineer. Went to a few of these math nights, and when he left, he said the inmates are running the asylum. So just because you want to show parents how to do things that don't make sense doesn't mean they're going to make sense. Because the way that we were teaching this math was insane. And like I said, been there, done that. Didn't ever get the shirt, but we did do all the classes and all that stuff. So, but if the math just makes sense, most people can figure it out. Until you get up into the high school level, and that's a little bit different. But there's no reason why parents in Hamilton County should not be able to help their children with elementary school math. There's just no reason for that, unless you're trying to make the kids think their parents are just dumb or something. And no, but what scares me though is this is what they're teaching teachers to teach in college, how they're teaching them to teach in college, and that's what they know. They don't know the simple way to do it. All they know is the hard way. And I guess that's kind of bothersome to me too, that that's what they're teaching them in college, so then they bring it on to the classroom, and maybe they don't know that it doesn't have to be this hard.
I think it's important to remember too, though, I mean, I'll be honest with you, fifth grade math, there was some piece of fifth grade math that standards have compressed, specifically when you think about principles of algebra, have compressed some of those concepts all the way down into later elementary. And so I don't want to offend any parents, but
Well,
it's not as easy as just saying every parent should be able to.
Well, I'm talking about kindergarten, first, and second, and third. I mean, seriously.
No,
This is
but fourth
crazy
and fifth
time.
grade, there's some concepts that are much
Well.
more difficult now than they were.
Well, I mean, that's okay, but like I say, when you're talking about little kids but when they start learning to hate math, I don't want them to learn to hate math in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade.
I think you came up with a new tagline for us.
Which
for
one?
math.
Don't hate it.
No, you started out at the beginning, make math fun.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Right now, these kids are miserable. That we make them think they're stupid because they can't figure out all this stuff. Just make it fun for them. It doesn't have to be hassle.
Ms. Jones?
So I have one question with the math. So we know this year, last year, we had students that are third grade, second grade that are struggling with math and literacy. Their parents are paying for tutoring, Kumon, all these, they go into centers, they're doing all kinds of stuff. They're paying retired teachers and everything. And some of these parents are not, do not lack mathematical competency. It's just the way we teach it, right? I mean, I know that because I have nieces in elementary school. I can help them, but it's the way I got it is the wrong way. Kind of like what Rhonda was saying. And so then I did have a little cousin who's now a freshman in college. I tried to help when he was at Brown, got the answer. That was the answer in the back of the book, but he had a whole conniption at my great aunt's house because he couldn't take it to school because I got it the wrong way. So I think my question is, going forward, and I know you said about the Canvas and whatever, but I think for me, I'm concerned that I've gotten several calls this past school year about students who are struggling with numeracy, but in RTI, and I've talked about this with Neely, I think Neely and I talked about this once, but in RTI, they're tiered for literacy. No, they're tiered for literacy, but the problem is in numeracy. But I was thinking, just common layman terms, that they're having problems with numeracy because they have problems with literacy because they can't read, so you can't comprehend what you're doing, but they're not tiering. You get what I'm saying? The tiering is off to me. And then they were sending documents on, I may have talked about this before, that don't really clearly explain to the parent what the next steps are. Just kind of like, this is what they're getting in the building, but nothing was offered to the parents of what they could do at home. And so then parents then end up spending exacerbating amounts of money with outside entities to get their kid up to level. And I have a kid in my family that they've done that, and she's up to level, and she's really excited about it, but I'm just concerned as to why she was in a very high-performing school and her teacher could not do that. And I'm not saying the teacher could not do that per se, but I'm just saying, I'm trying to figure out where the disconnect was. And they're not the only kid. Like, I could go on my time. Matter of fact, I was on my timeline yesterday. Business owner mom, very well known, put a post out like, hey, if your kid's gonna need a tutor this summer, I know somebody. They was already taking a list. I don't think that should be happening when these children are in high performing, or even just period, in Hamilton County schools. Like, I don't understand why, and everybody's had to have tutoring before, but I'm just kind of concerned as to why this is becoming more of a thing at a younger age for kids on basic skills, like reading and math. And I'm not by any means claiming to be smart in math, because I'm not. So my poor child gonna need some help. But his daddy is, but I'm not. Just being very transparent, I always struggled in math. But I did make it to calculus in high school at CSAS because I knew I had the basics, I feel like, in elementary school. Said all that to say, are you all, I don't know if this Shannon data was, are y'all seeing that disconnect? Like, because I'm not just talking out the side of my neck. Like, I can get you some parents on the phone right now. Like, this is a thing. And I talked to my peers about it at school board convention because this was a thing. And I don't want to say that it was, I asked the question, like, are they seeing this in their districts? Because I was seeing it with little brown and black children is where it was being profound. And so I was just kind of trying to figure out, and I didn't want to make it that thing, so that's why I asked them the question. And then that's when Ben gave me the example of his own kid, and everybody else started talking about this across districts. So it wasn't just a certain socioeconomic background. This is across all 11 districts. And I'm just really concerned about what that means. So I guess I need to know and feel secure in that this is not gonna keep having people get free public education but have to go pay for tutoring.
Well, I don't think any of us are ready to make that claim, but there are definitely systems in place for us to be able to support that. I think what you're really asking about is how we're using our RTI time and the limitations of that, and when a kid goes to ELA and when a kid goes to math, and if a kid needs both, what do you do to get their math up to speed? And that is part of the kind of art and science of this whole thing. Blake has already referenced those content leads. That is exactly what are in those pacing guides. So those pacing guides take these concepts and they spiral them back in. So if your kids are not making this here, let me tell you where it shows up again. Let me tell you the early skills that they need in order to master that next concept. So that's constantly happening so that it's kind of a both and. There is a gap though, and some of it is just sheer minutes. Like we would love to be able to provide 30 minutes of RTI or 45 minutes of RTI in math and in ELA to all of the kids that need it. There's just not enough minutes in the day. And so some of it is this dance between what do you prioritize first, and then how do you make sure that you're really precise in addressing the gap so that they can accelerate.
And then just going to budget, just kind of tip it over the budget. Will there be funding put in to support additional tutoring so that people don't have to do this? So I know the whole high dosage tutorial, little allowance came from the state, but that's not enough. And then we have other entities that do that. But I just think that it's important that when we think about that we're making sure that things are in place across all 11 districts so that they're not deficits for children that need it because they don't. Sometimes it's opposite for equity, right? And so it's like only if you meet these socioeconomic situations or you meet this and your tiering falls here that you're able, because there's not staff, and I know that sometimes there's not staff to stay over, whatever, but just how do you keep kids from falling through the cracks?
I think I would point right to our staffing model. We feel like we're doing a lot of things to try to address that specific thing. In the elementary staffing model, the base model, they have an RTI teacher. So in some schools that have high needs, that person's gonna coordinate tutors and interventionists because the school's been able to afford those through other funding sources. And then our schools that have potentially less kids in tier 2 and tier 3, that person is specifically able to address those needs, and the school can deploy them towards math needs or towards ELA needs based on what they're seeing in their buildings. And so I think we've been really pleased at the choices that our principals are making around the supplemental, so that they're balancing. You know, we've asked them to start with the premise of what's the problem you're trying to solve first, and then how do you think that you're going to solve it? And so we are seeing a lot of tutors, a lot of interventionists, a lot of flexibility in this particular space around kind of academic precision when it comes to intervention.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Connor?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on real quick to what Carissa said. So got an email looking at, so this, Carissa, to talk a little bit about what you were talking about with the learning loss camps, to add to it, because this is in the conversation piece of the third grade retention, that they just added a fiscal note to the learning loss camp bill that they're trying to help, which would fund learning loss camps, not just for third grade and the third grade retention, but from K all the way through third, to make sure that we're doing it. It has been added at $22 million, which wouldn't fund all that they're talking about, but it would be coming from the state, and it would again be learning loss across the board for summer and tutoring. So
I'm glad that we have some time, and just to repeat what you said earlier, Dr. Freeman, if we want to meet with you or any of the committee members, you would be happy to roll up your sleeves and do that with us.
Yeah.
So we got a little bit of time to have those conversations. I also like the idea, I've heard you talk about the workbook. The biggest complaint I get is I've got parents, often grandparents, that want to help, but they don't have a textbook, and there's no way to help. So I like the idea of having that workbook. Any other comments or questions for Dr. Freeman? Okay, I think we're moving down to Shannon Moody and Mary Ellen.
Yep. So we're going to see math in action in our budget. Let's transition there.
So again, we're considering our strategic plan as we work through our budget. And tonight we are going to focus on the revenue. So at our meeting last week, we just gave a high level overview, getting the budget cooked off. So tonight we're just going to dig into the revenue a little bit and walk you through where we're thinking about. So the first piece, wanted to give you some projections on current year revenue on property tax and sales tax. So property tax, we've got 22 and then the 23 actual to date. So we've done most of our collections for 23, and it looks like projection will be about the same. So we really just haven't seen the growth that we had been hoping. I think some of the way the reassessment played in, it just didn't generate let us realize some of the actual growth that we see in our community. But it's staying kind of flat there. And then sales tax lags behind when we get those revenues, so that doesn't come in quite as fast. But we do continue to see growth. The growth has slowed. I mean, during the pandemic, people were shopping a lot. We were really seeing a lot of growth, and I know with where the economy is, there's probably, although prices are going up, and we know some personal spending is probably going down. So we're still seeing growth, but it's not at as fast a pace as it was. So when we're looking at our revenue assumptions for 24, again, we work with the county commission, looking at our revenue assumptions, what they're gonna do, because get their read of the land. So sales tax, we're gonna start with a projection of growth about 5%. That's not quite as good as it has been. But it's where I think looking into the coming year where we think that might be. And then property tax, again, as I showed you, it hasn't grown as expected, but I do think the county is thinking that we'll see some of that growth come back next year, so we're projecting that at 2%. And then for TISA, we've gotten a projection, that last time I talked, we had one back from March of 2022, so we've gotten an updated projection for February, and they're going to be giving this each month. So before we come back, we should have hopefully a newer projection, and basically they add on another month of student data. And so if we are capturing more students through, could be, I know that the ex-ed department keeps working on identifying students who have some needs. So that would add to our student numbers in ex-ed, and that would add to our revenue. So that keeps building each month. And as students move around or students move to the district, I know we got lots of folks moving to the area. So those numbers will add into our revenue for TISA for next year. What we don't have right now is we don't have the new fiscal capacity, and that's an important number because TISA says here's how much the formula funds. The fiscal capacity tells us how much we fund and how much the state funds. And so again, it's how do we compare to all the other counties in the state. So until we know that, we really don't know quite what that means and how much we're actually going to get from the state. So we're using the projection from March of 2022. We're hoping in April when we'll get that, so we'll have to do our budget with our best guess on that. But if we do get any additional information, we'll just keep bringing information as we get it into the process. So wanted to show a little bit on TISA. So this is kind of our first projection from that we got received in February. And so I broke it down into the pieces of the budget, and I'm showing charters and RP, so we get it as one number, but includes the data for both groups of schools. And so the total out of the $398 million that TISA is providing, again, that's state and local contribute to that. About $20 million for charters, and then $380 million for us. And then you can see the base and the weights. So that's the part that's funded with state and local. And then direct, that comes from direct state funding. So that includes some funds for CTE. There's some direct charter funding in there, but that is all 100% state funded. So based on the March of 2022 calculation, the local share would be 39.5%. And so the estimated local share of the $398 million would be $150 million. So but that again, just depending on where the rest of the counties compare to us, could go up or down. If this stayed the same, actual amount there from the state could change. So there's a lot out there on TISA, and if you want any additional information to help kind of walk through this, but the base, and I'll do a couple quick things. The base is at 6,860 times the number of students. And then the weights, again, looks at the particular needs of the students, and it's a percentage of the base and applied to the number of students in each category. So then, based on that, I'm showing kind of a comparison for 23, looking at BEP to how that translates to 24 using TISA. And you can see that the TISA formula actually requires less input from the local to contribute to that formula. And so, and again, in our county, there's some counties that I think it's a little closer. Ours obviously served us well in how much the state is picking up of that formula. The state grants, we've talked, I think there's 3 of them, Safe Schools, Coordinated School Health, and Family Resource Center that are rolling in. So that's no longer a separate line, that's just included in the TISA amount. And I broke it out, those 2 amounts, to show the TISA based on those projections between state and local. And then I took our projections with those projected increases and said, here's our projected local revenue, took out what needs to go into the formula, and then that leaves the additional local. And then what that drives a little more than it did with BEP is because we have to use that number, and it gets distributed a different way to the charters. So the charter number from TISA, the state says, here's how much they earned in TISA, fund them that. Then the additional local gets split up per student. And then the other operating revenue includes a variety of other, when we do tuition for students, we have some indirects in there. There's money for ROTC programs, so it's a variety of other resources that are in there. So when you look at our operating for 23, the revised operating, which I think for operating that actually ties to what we had at the beginning of the year, is $453 million, and we're projecting next year to be at $518 million for the additional investment through TISA, along with the growth that we've projected in our budget. So then we want to kind of wrap that into then looking at all the resources we have that invest in various things across our district. So we go from the operating revenue, which we just went through, and then we add in the state grants. So one of the items there is the pre-K, so that's included in state grants. The big change from 23 to 24 is that's where the additional summer learning supports have been. We could get those in 24, but we haven't been awarded those, so they're not included. So that's why there's that big change for 23, but they're budgeted in 23. Any decrease in grants revenue, we have a decrease in expenses. So even though the numbers may change, it's a corresponding change in expense as well. And then we've, federal, again, that's another place where we've seen, because the additional investments from ARP and other relief money is separate from ESSER, is included in there, self-funded. Again, there's things where we get things throughout the year, so those numbers as we go through the year increase, but we only project the things that we already kind of have either ongoing agreements to receive or things that we've already been awarded. And then school nutrition, again, does their budget based on what they expect to develop through sales plus funding from the government. And then we've shown you the ESSER 2, and again, that's going to run out after this year, and then ESSER 3. The reason 24 is so much higher is because it's really the work for Tyner is in there. So we think, we really haven't in the past kind of shown those all together. We really think it's important because we support all of our strategic areas through all these different funds that how we leverage those best. So again, just on the timeline, so what we're planning on March 28th is we're going to get you a kind of a high level on pulling the budget together. We may still be working on getting some of the detailed line item budgets, and we'll get those to you as soon as we can. But we are continuing to refine different things in the budget, again, looking at the revenues, looking at feedback on the expenditures, pulling in additional information. So looking at the impact on TISA, making sure we understand exactly how all that's going to flow through, getting cost estimates, so taking in information for the curriculum and figuring out where those all work in the budget. So the March 28th is the next budget work session, and then the 10th we'll have the budget workshop, where we can really dig into your questions, but you'll have time to look at the information, and then individual board meetings before the vote on April 20th. So that's our presentation tonight on revenue.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Any questions for Mary Ellen?
Yeah.
Rhonda?
I just want to know, how in the world can we just have 2% growth in property tax with all the building going on? What in the world? That's a little crazy, don't you think?
That's a great question.
That is a great question. I've asked, and
What's
Okay.
interesting is not only projected 2% growth, but the collected property tax actually went down from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23, which we don't understand.
So all this growth isn't
that new math?
actually helping. It's the new math.
Look at the squiggly line.
Can't blame everything on it.
But the county, and just to be, the county has that same, they've seen that same thing, same question, they've seen the same number.
Ms. Robinson?
Back to the property taxes, is it because late pay or it's?
I mean, it's because we consider that in the numbers that we look at. It was actually, so from fiscal year 21 to fiscal year 22, it was a little over million and a half decrease. And they base our accruals, we look at what's already been billed, so it's not just collections. But they've been researching it, and I have not heard any answer yet from the county.
Because I was like the others, it's like with all the
Yeah,
growth,
it-
that would compensate for the late pay, but I didn't know how late is late. Thank you.
Seeing no more lights, we'll go down to any committee chairperson have any updates for us. Mr. Connor?
Yeah, I just wanted to say again, I was at an event last night that asked me to speak about the third grade retention and, forgive me, at the legislative committee. And for those of you that may have been watching, on Tuesday, the Senate and the House committees got together and they knocked down what was 16 different amendments to that piece of legislation down to 4. Most of those talk about who gets the reporting on it. There is one that has some extras added to it about testing, which currently there is a way that our testing is added in for the iReady, but not benchmarks. And that's the one thing from the whole of this legislation that I wanted to point out as my review, is that they have said on the Hill that they want to make sure that they hold the state to be able to keep control of this. People have gone on record saying that. They've said it on the House floor, the Senate floor. The goal of all the amendments is to make sure that they don't allow the local level to hold the power over the retention. They want to keep it at the state level. That's been the going stated. So at the end of the legislative session, I'm going to repeat, I'm going to have another town hall personally here in this room to go through what has been passed and how it may affect Hamilton County. But that's a really important note that's going on right now. All of those 4 amendments have now been put onto the schedule for both committees and to the floor. So,
Thank you for your work with that, Mr. Connor. Any other committee updates? I'm thinking that because of the time, we're already 6:20 almost, that we perhaps should adjourn our work session and take maybe a 5-minute break and just go right into our board meeting. Is that okay with everybody? Yes. Okay, work session is